Hey guys, and in this video we're going to talk about Moscow. Moscow is the capital and the largest city of Russia with a population of more than 12 million people, located on the Moskvaya River in the west of the country. Moscow for Russians is the center of everything. In the US you have movie industry in Los Angeles, you got software development in the Silicon Valley, and finance in New York, but in Russia everything is centered around Moscow, where all the headquarters of major Russian corporations are located and where all money eventually goes to. Although Muscovites complain about the climate, the weather here is milder than in other parts of Russia like Siberia or the Urals. The climate here is typical for the European part of Russia, and average summer temperatures are similar to that of cities like Paris or Berlin. Moscow has the best universities in Russia. Russian teenagers come here for education. In 2009, there were more than 250 universities and colleges in Moscow, according to the 2018 QS World University Rankings. Moscow State University is the highest-ranking Russian educational institution. And if you choose to study in Moscow, you'd better choose technical or IT majors because those are recognized all over the world. You walk the streets of Moscow and you see all these fancy cars and you wonder, how much money are these guys making? The average salary in Moscow in 2017 is just $1,100 a month, which by Russian standards is very good salary, but the income gap is unbelievable. That explains all the Ferraris and the latest model BMWs you see on the streets. No wonder, Moscow enjoys much higher standards of living compared to the rest of Russia. In terms of billionaires, Moscow now takes the 4th place in the world, being even ahead of London. Moscow is home to all the federal authorities of the country, the government of the Russian Federation, the State Duma, the Federal Council, the Supreme Court, and the Moscow Kremlin, which is the official residence of the president. All this turned Moscow into a city of status and special vehicles with sirens and flashing lights on top. There are at least 630 cars used by top-ranking government officials that have the right to use sirens and ignore traffic rules when necessary. They're allowed to speed, drive on the wrong side of the road, or even pass ambulances or fire engines. This is unthinkable in the US and Europe, right? And it's extremely uncomfortable for ordinary citizens. In Moscow, it doesn't really matter what you do for a living. If you're not part of the system and you don't have connections, you're a second-rate citizen. Some high-ranking government officials never cross paths with ordinary citizens at all. They live in their gated communities outside of Moscow and prefer to take their vacations abroad. More and more Russians come to live in Moscow. Why? Well, because salaries here are higher and the city provides great business opportunities. Here you can find the wealthiest customers in Russia and earn a good living. There are lots of international companies and more people speak English, so you have excellent opportunities to build an international career. It is easy to meet and learn from famous Russian TV stars and speakers. Lots of them have open events, which sometimes are completely free of charge. The city is well taken care of. In the center, they wash the streets several times a day. Moscow has such a diversity of architecture, starting with Kremlin walls and the Stalin period famous Seven Sisters and the modern skyscrapers of Moscow City. Everything is so beautiful. In the recent years, they have renovated a lot of walking areas within the garden ring. You can ride anything from a bicycle to a scooter or go for a walk with your friends. Moscow is such a green city. It has more green areas than London and New York. In the very center of the city, you can escape from the noise in one of the largest parks in Moscow, Gorky Park. For everyone, you can lie on puffs and deck chairs, ride a bike, there's free Wi-Fi, a skating park, and the biggest sandpit in Moscow. Lots of fountains and hot girls too. Your social life can never get boring because there's tons of things to do and tons of choices in terms of bars and restaurants offering every type of cuisine to suit most budgets, from Chinese noodles to Georgian khinkali to Asian shark soup. In Moscow, you can satisfy any gastronomic foodie. What are some of the famous sights of Moscow? In the historic core sits the Kremlin, the biggest active fortress in Europe that's home to the president, and the Tsar's treasures in the armory. Outside its walls is the Red Square, Russia's symbolic center. It's home to Lenin's mausoleum, the State Historical Museum's comprehensive collection, and St. Basil's Cathedral, known for its colorful, onion-shaped domes. Russia's main department store, GUM, has a stunning interior and houses a variety of high-end boutiques. Even if shopping is not on your to-do list, the GUM is still worth a visit. The glass-roofed arcade faces Red Square and offers a variety of classy eateries. Arbat Street. Arbat is one of Moscow's most touristy spots. Lots of cafes and restaurants, live music performers, as well as souvenir shops and tattoo salons. Tsaritsina Museum Reserve. The former summer residence of Empress Catherine the Great was commissioned in 1775. Tsaritsina Park has been fundamentally renovated since 1980s to look even brighter than the original. With its opulently decorated buildings, gardens, meadows, and forests, Tsaritsina Park is the perfect place for a green getaway in Moscow, occupying an area of more than 247 acres. There's also the skyscraper district called Moscow City. Here you'll find offices of international companies, apartments, restaurants, and shops. For a Russian city to have such an American downtown is very unusual. Here, one-bedroom apartment will cost you $500,000. For the best panoramic views of the city, come to Restaurant 60, which is located on the 62nd floor of the Federation Tower. This place seemed to have it all: head-spinning views, great food, and vibrant atmosphere, and no entry ticket. All you have to do is buy a glass of beer. If you are into museums and theaters and galleries, there is no shortage of cultural and entertainment places. The quality of museums, art galleries, theaters, and concerts is also outstanding, including well-known all over the world, big and small theaters, the Tretyakov Gallery, with one of the largest collections of Russian art in the world, the Armory Chamber, the Museum of Tolerance, and so many more. Despite being such a huge city, Moscow feels surprisingly safe. Foreigners should take precautions that they would in any other city. Avoid shady people and walking alone in some dark streets late at night. Bribery and corruption are still big issues in Russia though. Unfortunately, there were many contract killings of prominent politicians and journalists over the last 10 years, starting with Anna Politkovskaya, an independent journalist. And this is the bridge on which Boris Nemtsov, one of the most influential liberal politicians of modern Russia, was gunned down, right under the walls of the Kremlin. In Moscow, everything is gigantic. Buildings, roads, everything is huge. Kutuzovsky Avenue, in the very center, has 10 lanes, complicated road connections, garden ring with a length of 15 kilometers, and the huge Moscow Circle Road. Despite all of this, traffic in Moscow is notoriously bad. It's normal to commute for an hour or more just to get to work in the morning. Residents of Moscow are used to many kilometers of red lights and loss of time. Every time you need to get someplace, you have to get your GPS to get the best possible route. And to leave the city on the weekend, you'll have to get up really early. In the year 2000, there were 2.6 million cars in the city. Then in 2012, already 4.5 million, and every year the number of cars grows by about 4%. Moscow has the best roads in Russia. Today, car sharing and bicycle sharing gained huge popularity. You won't be able to ride a bike all over the city, but the situation is changing for the better and more areas are open for cycling. The main transport of Moscow is the subway, or the metro as they call it here. Metro in Moscow, along with a monorail road, has 214 stations, and they're putting a lot of effort to build new ones. How many more stations do they need, you ask? You know, if you look at tiny Oslo in Norway, it has 101 metro stations for a population of just 500,000, so it's clear that there's room for growth. They're planning to introduce 40 more new stations in different parts of the city by 2020. Daily metro ridership is more than in New York or London. Moscow is always action-packed. Everybody's in a hurry, and lots of places work 24/7. Thousands of people are rushing to work in the morning, looking at their smartphones and tablets. They're stressed, they're nervously trying to get into the crowded metro, and nobody smiles without a reason. It's a Russian tradition. It's considered awkward. What are the cons of living in Moscow? Well, it feels like someone is always watching your back. Security gates everywhere. Every public place you go to, they always scan your bags. Housing prices. For a typical Russian with an average salary, it's going to take decades to save up for a modest apartment. There's a tough parking situation. The city is huge and some friends don't see each other for months. For many, just to get out to the city center on the weekend is an accomplishment. In 2012, the city integrated southern western territories. The so-called New Moscow was formed. The huge city is just getting bigger. Due to the large numbers of vehicles in the city, there's an alarming situation with the environment. Not all of Moscow is homogeneous. The outskirts are very different from the Garden Ring area. Outside of the Garden Ring, Moscow can hardly be distinguished from any other major city in Russia. This is what Sokolniki looks like. If you love nature, fishing and hunting, picking berries and mushrooms, pure air and water, just know that to get to the nearest decent forest is going to be at least a 150-kilometer drive. Some people spend more than 3 hours to get to the countryside. Moscow attracts the brightest, the most talented and ambitious people from all over Russia. You get used to the rhythm, you move fast, you do 10 things at once. And those who get used to this rhythm are unlikely to like it anywhere else. In general, Moscow, just like any other major city, is what you want it to be. The city adapts to you. You want to party? Sure, come get it. You want to have the cultural part of Moscow? Sure, why not? You want to build a career? Go for it. The cost of real estate in Moscow is all about location. The price per square meter varies from $2,000 on the outskirts to $6,500 in the center. Housing in the center can cost impressive amounts of money. There is a so-called golden triangle, where even an old babushka's one-bedroom apartment can cost you more than $1 million. People living in the center even follow a weird dress code. You gotta have at least a black Mercedes or a BMW. If you really want to stand out, you gotta buy a Bentley or Ferrari or a Maybach and hire a driver to drive you around. According to the polls, the greatest fear among Muscovites is the risk of running into someone who will marry them and then demand part of the apartment. The center of Moscow is very far from the realities of real Russia. If Russia complains about the brain drain, on the national level, Moscow steals all the best professionals from the regional cities, which further reduces their competitiveness. All the famous Russian singers, businessmen, and politicians eventually end up in Moscow. For Russians, the taste of life in Moscow is special. They walk the streets, they see nice cars, and they think that maybe one day they too can achieve the same standards of living. And they fall in love with the city. Moscow simply does not have competition among other Russian cities. And what do you guys think about Moscow? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you.